Welcome to Business Reporter's Future of Payments campaign. I'm Rachel Hicks. Google the term financial inclusion. The results suggest a term that is the tagline for a global social justice campaign, with most articles promoting the financial inclusion of millions of third world inhabitants who currently have no access to banking facilities. But financial inclusion has a different meaning in Europe. Many small enterprises, startups and entrepreneurs have experienced that the services do not always benefit them. They discover that finding the right business loans, banking and payment solutions don't help with their everyday struggles. Why? How does this financial exclusion influence the economy of nations? Well, this is what we're going to ask Anders Cour from Banking Circle. Anders, welcome.
Thank you.
Now tell me, what is the financial impact and the economic impact of financial exclusion?
I think from our perspective in the banking circle, and if we look into Europe, we have conducted a survey, a large survey and research on the banking circle where we're quite convinced that as a society we're missing out on a big opportunity. As you rightly pointed out, financial inclusion in a broader spectrum is also about people in third world countries cannot get access to bank accounts. But if you actually look into Europe, there are many small to medium-sized businesses that have in a European context the same challenges of obtaining access to bank accounts, obtaining the working capital that they need to transact. And I think our survey showed us that only 20% of the SME base in Europe had a satisfied relationship towards their bank and the way where they could transact and obtain bank accounts, while 25% was dissatisfied and struggled to obtain the working capital that they needed. If you look into the UK specifically, almost 60% of the workforce is employed with SMEs. And it shows how big the contribution from that part of the business life is. And if we don't succeed in enabling these businesses to grow, we'll miss out a huge opportunity from a macroeconomic growth perspective.
But finances have many different aspects. What would you say are the three most burning ones for SMEs and startups?
I think, in my opinion, you have the access to accounts, not just to domestic accounts as a UK SME in sterling, but also to be able to transact in Scandinavian currencies, in euro, in US dollars. The second one to me is the ability to then actually transfer funds into these regions. And the third one is the working capital. If you look in more specifically towards these 3 points, I think you have, looking into the economy and the development of the digital economy over the last 15 years, it goes without saying that whether you are a Fortune 500 business or small to medium-sized business, you have to act as a global player. And if you don't have access to the most needed financial tools to do that, you get serious challenges in growing your business. If you look into the transaction side, the slow settlement cycles, especially with the marketplaces, can be a challenge. And then obviously the access to working capital, which was the last bullet I pointed out, which is like something that can really hamper growth over time.
You mentioned slow settlement cycles. What do you mean by slow, and how would you define unacceptably slow?
If you look into settlement cycles, there are various payment methods, and they typically come with different settlement cycles. It also depends on to which recipient, and it depends on which country. So it is extremely fragmented if you look into the settlement cycles. We have seen, or we see on a daily basis, settlement cycles that are on hourly basis, which are fine, but we've also seen them up to 90 days, which is typically if you work within the marketplace space. And there can be reasons for that, and they don't only have to be technologically based. It can also be because some intermediary somewhere in the value chain is managing their counterparty exposure and are holding back funds. But if we can find someone to take that counterparty exposure, you can increase the settlement cycle significantly, which I believe will again increase the growth of the specific SMEs involved in that, which again will contribute to the wider growth of the entire economy.
Okay, but we know that finances have been governed to some degree by technology, as you mentioned, and that it has taken a number of days or weeks in the past, and yet SMEs have been around for a very long time. So isn't instant payment really a luxury? And why do you think that's crucial for financial inclusion?
You can claim it's a luxury to be able to do that on an instant basis. I think if you look into the difference between the economy in the last 15 years, and especially how it will look in 15 years from now, and then 50 years ago, everything happens much faster. We are much more connected as a society. Digitisation has made consumers, put them in a position where a consumer does not really care whether he or she buys something in Canada or in Sweden, if they live in the UK or they live in Germany. And that requires a lot from the underlying providers. And again, eventually from the SME selling goods and services. So if we want to keep up with the rest of the economy, if we want to make sure that we do not hamper the growth of that, I think real-time payments or instant payments, as you say, is required to keep up that pace. And that's why we're pushing a lot for it at the banking circle.
I was going to say, how in that case does Banking Circle offer a solution? Because clearly you think things should be better.
I think what we build is you could call it a super correspondent banking network, where we enable financial service businesses, whether it's banks or payment gateways or other financial tech businesses, to do what they're really good at, service the end client within their domestic area. And then we will cater for the transaction based outside their domestic core, giving them the tools to be able to offer working capital, to be able to offer bank accounts to their client base on a global scale and as fast as possible with very low settlement cycles.
Anders, thank you for coming and sharing those insights with us today.
Thank you very much.